I'm just finishing up your lawnmower blade. What are you up to?
Hey, what's going on? Hey, how you making out with the tank?
I was thinking about maybe getting to the tank today. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. I'm kind of anxious to get going here, so, the weather's good. I want to go for a ride, so let me know how you're making out there. Well, how are you making out?
Well, it's going okay. I mean, it's not...
Well, just hold on a second.
Karl, are you there?
Yeah, I'm still here. Hold on. Yeah. Okay, you're almost done? That's super. Just, getting a little bored here, so let me know. Thanks.
You know, the most common question that I get about my DR650 is about the fuel tank and why the heck I need such a large tank. Now, for any DR owner or adventure rider for that matter, the answer's obvious. It's all about range. Now, Karl's bike still has the factory anemic 13-liter fuel tank on it. So today we're going to change that and swap it out for a 20-liter ACERBIS tank that he just recently bought. So I'm going to show you how it's done and what's involved today on Dino's Tinker Shed. Stick around, this one should be fun. As we've talked about in past videos, one of the DR650's shortcomings, especially when used as an adventure bike, is its fuel range, or more specifically, its ridiculously small fuel tank. Now, when the first generation DR650 hit showroom floors in 1990, it came with a 21-liter fuel tank, but over the years the tank size was reduced until finally the bike was redesigned in 1996 and the tank evolved into the current capacity of only around 13 liters. With an average fuel consumption of about 5 liters per 100 kilometers, or 47 miles per gallon, this means the bike has about 250 kilometer range, or 155 miles, before you either need to fill up or you run out of fuel and you learn how to deal with stress really, really fast. Now, Karl looked at several aftermarket tank brands and decided on this one, the smaller of the two available tanks from ACERBIS. Now, with 20 liters of fuel on board, or around 5.3 gallons, the ACERBIS tank should give Karl around 400 kilometers, not quite doubling his range, but certainly it would significantly extend it. Now, the larger tank from ACERBIS was a 24-liter tank, or around 6.6 gallons. Now, Karl thought about this tank, but after looking at my 30-liter Safari tank, he thought it was maybe just a little bit too big. Now, originally I thought ACERBIS was Australian, like my Safari tank, but it's actually Italian. And this makes a lot of sense given Italy's history with off-road racing and its love of motorsports in general. Now, either way, this is a quality tank. So let's take a look at it and see what this great looking tank has to offer. So overall, the ACERBIS tank is made out of very, very thick plastic. It comes standard with a motocross style fuel cap that is vented. And it's not extremely wide if you turn it this way. The width isn't too bad. Now, what's nice about this is if you flip it over, it has a standard petcock hole here, but it also has an optional petcock over here that you could drill out and put in a second petcock. Overall, very, very nice options. Now included in the parts bag were a vent hose. There's your standard petcock, so this is not a vacuum assisted petcock, and there's a little O-ring on the bottom here that you don't want to lose. There's your tank clip, a little bit of hardware here and some spacers that go inside of these grommets. What's interesting is these two grommets are different styles, so I think they probably were put in the bag incorrectly. And then of course there's the ubiquitous Go Fast sticker. This is good for probably, I don't know, 5 to 10 horsepower at least. So on top of the parts that are provided by ACERBIS, you're going to need a few other things. You're going to need a little bit of fuel line. The amount that's on the bike's probably not enough. We're going to replace an inline filter. Karl already has one, but we're going to replace that. You need some kind of fuel clamps to go with a fuel hose. So there's several different styles here. You can even use a gear clamp like this if you like. And there's an optional thing that I'm going to use, which is one of these tank vents here, so that we don't have to have that hose that runs into the front of the head tube. So overall, this is what you're going to need. Now instructions on this are limited to this. Basically 3 pictures that tell you how to actually install your tank. It's a little lacking, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to make a video like this. So basically you have a parts list up here and 2 separate. It's really not very good. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to clean the tank out. And the way I'm going to do mine here, or Karl's, is to actually blow the tank out itself. So I'm going to take the cap off to start with, and this paper. And right away I'm going to put this little valve cover, or this little vent hose on there for Karl. I think it's a cleaner fit, so we will put this back on when we get the bike put back together. And what you're looking for inside here is you're trying to clean out any plastic that may have come inside the tank from when they drilled out the petcock holes, or any flashing that may have come loose. So I don't really hear anything in there, but I'm going to make a little bit of noise here, and I am going to use my blowgun to blow this out. The next thing we're going to do is we're actually going to install our petcock here. So again, you want to make sure there's that little O-ring on the bottom, and you want to make sure that the petcock itself, the handle, faces outwards of the bike. So to do that, we're going to flip it over, and you're going to see right here where the petcock goes in. So it just goes in like that, and it is held in place with these self-tapping screws that I'm just going to put in there with a nut driver. And again, remember when we talked about not tightening one side more than the other on things like this? Let's hope this will work. I may need to get just a regular wrench on there by the looks of it. This isn't going to quite do it. Oh, there we go. Alright. So I think what I'll do is just snug these down, and then I'll come back with a wrench, give them just a little bit of a tighten up. I'm just going to take my 8mm wrench, and I'm just going to gently, I'm not going to over tighten these, or what will happen is you'll strip out those plastic threads for sure. And the way I'm going to check this is a little bit unorthodox. Maybe, I don't know, maybe this is what everybody else does. And I am going to make sure that the petcock is, I believe that is the off position. I'm just going to blow into the tank. Nope, that's reserve. Let's try that. Seems to hold air pressure. I'm sure it's going to hold fuel. The first step in getting the tank off, as we talked about, is removing the side panels. And these are the side panels I'm talking about. There's one on either side of the bike. And they could not be easier to get off. They're really, really, really simple. There's one Phillips head screw right here that you're going to take out. And that whole side panel just slides forward, and it easily exposes the 12 millimeter bolt that holds the seat on. There's only two of them. So I'll take the one off the other side, and then we'll take the seat bolts off, and this seat will literally just slide right off. So let's do that. Okay, now that we have the bolts out, it's just a simple process of pulling it back on the seat and sliding that nose down, and off comes your seat. I'll set this on the bench, and then we can have a look at the tank. Before we can actually remove the tank from the bike, we have to actually disconnect it, the fuel lines that is, from the carburetor. Now that starts here at your petcock. Now you'll notice that there's, on the stock petcock, there are three locations that the petcock lever can be in. There's the on position, which is all the way to the front like this. There is the reserve position, which the bike was in. And there is a PRI, or prime position, straight down. Now the prime position, I'm going to put it into the on position, facing forward. Now the prime position circumvents the vacuum petcock in this, and it will allow fuel to flow freely without the engine running to fill your float bowl. Now we do not want the petcock to be in that position when we disconnect the fuel lines, or we'll have fuel all over the place. So by putting it in the on position, I'm quite confident that there will be no fuel come out of this hose other than what's in it currently. Okay, so let's disconnect the fuel hose now. Now from the petcock, fuel travels down through what Karl has here, which is an external fuel filter, and then all the way down into the carb tube right here. Now I'm going to disconnect this particular fuel line to start with and drain any remaining residual fuel within that fuel line so it doesn't go everywhere. And the way I'm going to do that is quite simple. I'm going to use a nut driver here to loosen this band clamp. I'm going to pull this up and out of the way if I can here. We need to loosen that still a little bit more. And these particular style of clamps are fantastic. And I'm just going to use a measuring cup to drain that fuel in, and hopefully this will come off reasonably easy. Oh man, if it doesn't, at this point I'm just going to cut it. I'm not going to mess around with it. There we go. So any remaining fuel that's in there wasn't much, comes out. There was like literally that much fuel. As I mentioned, there is a vacuum line that runs from your carburetor to this port on your petcock. And this is what actually opens up the petcock when the engine's running and allows fuel to go through. Now, we're going to take this hose off so that we can take the tank itself off. So let's just do that. And it's fairly easy. We come in here and we take that clamp off, and then we should be able to just wiggle that off and away we go. So all of this here is going to go with the tank. We'll lift it off once we get the bolts out. The last two fittings or fasteners that we need to deal with are under the seat right here, and they're a pair of 10 millimeter bolts. So we'll just take those off, and then the tank can actually be lifted off and we can get access to the frame. Karl was kind enough to actually drain his tank down onto reserve so we don't have a lot of weight in the tank, and I encourage people to do that. It's not necessary, but it is a good practice just so you're not struggling with a full tank of fuel. And that means less fuel you have to transfer over into your new tank. Now the way these tanks come off is there's a pair of rubber pucks that sit right about here on the frame rails. We're going to lift the back of the tank up and slide it back, and it'll come off of those rubber pucks. more often than not, those rubber pucks come off. Everybody will tell you, don't lose the pucks. They're pretty big, and if you're in a good shed like mine here, they're pretty hard to lose, but it is good advice. So let's see if we can get this tank off. So we're just sort of lifting the back of it, we're sliding it back, and off it comes. Look at that. I'm just going to set this over on the bench here, and we'll have a closer look. Here are these rubber pucks I was telling you about that tend to fall off when you take the tank itself off. Now, I've never really lost one of these, but it is a good idea to check to make sure if they roll around. Unlike your stock tank, which uses this plastic guard up front to sort of block some of the area off, this needs to be removed for the new ACERBIS tank to actually be mounted. It won't slide far enough up on the tank here or on the frame in order to get it mounted. So we're going to have to take this off. To do that, I'm going to use just a 10mm nut driver. This entire guard here is held on just with a couple 10mm bolts on each side. We should be able to take these off and the whole item will lift off. On my safari tank, the horn has to be relocated. There's not enough room underneath for the horn to sit the way it is. Now on this tank, I dry fit it and there is lots of room for the horn. These turn signals up here, on the other hand, are going to have to be moved. When you turn the bars lock to lock, what happens is those turn signals contact the upper part of the tank. So we're going to have to flip the turn signals. But for now, let's get this tank on here and see what it looks like. These cushion the tank when you bolt it down. Now I'm pretty sure that this one is actually the right one. This one here looks a little bit long to me. So I may need to trim this. So I think what I'll do is I'll put this one in, I'll put in the little bushing that goes there. We'll put it on the bike, I'll put them both in, and if I have to, I'll trim this one down with a razor knife when it's on the bike. For now, I'll leave it the way it is. Sometimes these things can be the most frustrating part of a job. There we go. Now see how that one fits in perfect like that? This one here, I'm afraid, is going to be standing a little bit proud. And then these little bushings would go right inside like so. Right here, you're going to see two brass inserts right into the plastic. And they hold on this top clip here that your your seat actually slides up and into, and it holds the front of your seat down. So it's important that you have this on here. Now I'm going to put a little bit of blue Loctite on the bolts that go in there, just to make sure they don't vibrate out. You don't need a whole lot of this. And make sure that the little lip here faces out. So that acts like a little bit of a ramp and allows the seat to slide underneath. So I just put a little bit more on here. And I like to use blue Loctite, again, because it's not permanent. If I ever want to get this off of here, I don't want to have to fight with it. And it's not going to go in terribly tight. It's just going to go in with, again, with a little bit of a nut driver here. But I am going to snug it down. If you tighten this too much, you're liable to turn those nut certs in there, and then you're into a whole world of hurts. So sometimes it pays just to take your time on this kind of stuff. All right. As I said, the new tank simply fits on and slides over top of those rubber pucks. It goes right up nice tight. We should be able to insert this hardware without too much problems here. Remember this little guy here, our vacuum line? This needs to be closed off, and the best way to do that is with a vacuum cap right at the carburetor. Now, I don't have any vacuum caps. I have just about everything else in this shop. But what I'm going to do then is I am just going to use a zip tie, and I am going to zip tie this closed. So this is just like when you pinch off your garden hose, it does the same thing, and this just won't allow any fuel or vacuum now to come across that and screw around with the carburetor jetting. So I'm probably going to put another one on there, and then we'll get on to hooking this fuel system up. Now that we've got the vacuum tube out of the way, I'm going to try and install just the fuel line that came off of the bike originally. So I'm going to slide it back down over top of the fuel pipe, like so. And I'm going to see if I can get this onto here without too much trouble. I think that actually looks like it's pretty good. Well, I'm just going to tighten these up, get them settled in there. And then the last thing we're going to have to look at, I suppose, are those turn signals. One of the issues when you put an oversized tank on is these turn signal pods can contact the tank at full lock. I'll try and demonstrate this here. You can kind of see the tank actually contacts that light. So what we're going to do is there's a small bracket in here, and I think we're going to try to rotate the light forward and up a little bit to see if we can stop that from happening. This triple clamp bolt has to come off to get these pods out to start with. I'll put it back in just to hold it in place. And then we take off the fairing. So to do this, there are 3 small bolts, 2 on either side, and then 1 just underneath the headlight here. Once you get those screws out, it's easy enough just to pull off this fairing, and that gives you access to the wiring harness underneath the fairing. Once we open up the wiring harness, we can trace out where the actual pod plugs go, and once we locate them, we can actually unplug them like this. Boom. It's just a small lever you lift up and you unplug it. Now we can pull that wire through, take out the bolt that we put back in to hold the pod, and the whole light assembly comes off. Now I'm going to have to take the light off the bracket, so this small nut on the back side has to come off as well, and then the wires just come right through. We're going to trim off these 2 tabs here just to make it so that the bracket can actually rotate. And as you see the circle here, the hole isn't perfectly a circle. It's actually more like an oval, so we have to make that round. So we'll cut off the tabs here, and we'll use just a cutoff wheel on an angle grinder, and we'll dress that down with a flap wheel just to make it smooth, so there's no sharp edges. And we'll just check that just to make sure it looks pretty good here. Now I'm going to use a step drill to make this hole perfectly round. It seemed like the logical drill, but it still sticks. It's a hard thing to drill a hole like this. But eventually I just worked away at it and pecked away at it and got it through. So there we go. Now it looks like we're just about ready for reassembly. Now we'll just lightly put these brackets back in place, and don't forget on the left hand side you have the brake guide that you have to sort of manipulate in there as well. Now I had to tweak mine a little bit to get the turn signals to sort of peak upwards a little bit, and I had to go back a couple times to get this so it was just enough that it would clear the tank. But once you have that worked out, you can actually feed the wire back through along with the nut and fasten the turn signal loosely back in the bracket. Now once you find the perfect spot, you can come back in and tighten up all the fasteners, so the triple clamp bolt at the top here, and then ultimately the indicator pod itself gets tightened up. Now you don't need to be Hercules here, just snug them up. And we click back in all of the connectors and we wrap them back up in their protective plastic. I still can't believe this is how Suzuki does it. Oh, and don't forget the reusable zip tie here. These are really handy, but it's quite that bike here. Now test the lights before you put the fairing back on. Make sure the headlight works and your turn signals work. And then it's just a matter of putting the fairing back on, and this job's just about done. Let's put some fuel in it and wrap this job up. This was a great project to do. I had a lot of fun doing it, and I am confident that Karl is going to really enjoy that new fuel tank when we head up north this year to ride some logging roads. Now, this is a fairly easy project to do. You're going to be in around $400 or $500 all said and done, but it's really just spinning wrenches, turning screwdrivers, and drilling a couple holes, and you can have the added benefit of longer range on your DR650. Now, I really like coming out to my shed, and I encourage you to go out to your shed or garage or even your backyard to take some of these types of projects on. So until next time, you have yourself a great day. I really enjoyed having you in my shop, and I'll see you again soon on Dino's Tinker Shed.